Welcome to a brother with questions, man. I am your guy, B period, man. Thank y'all again for joining me. Today, I just got a little quick hitter for you today. I want to do a follow up on a podcast I did a few weeks ago, and this one is about Bunnell Elementary. Let me scroll down. You see it right here, Bunnell Elementary School. And so, for those that didn't see the original podcast, I'm gonna give you a little background. So at the beginning of school in Bunnell Elementary School, there was an assembly done where the two employees at the school led a assembly where they took out the black students, fourth and fifth graders, to have a conversation with them about their state test scores. And the gist of the assembly was that they wanted to tell the kids or encourage the kids to do better. So they let the kids know that of the fourth and fifth grade black students, only 32% of them were passing. So approximately, what is that number? 68% of them were not meeting standard. And so they wanted to, number one, they say the goal was to encourage the students to do better. So they offered some incentives. But where the assembly went left, if you will, is that someone, or at least the two black teachers who ran the assembly, thought it a great time to keep it real with the students. And I say that lightly, but as a part of the assembly, apparently they had a discussion with the idea that if you were one of these students who did not pass state standards and how that would impact you, going into middle school, going into high school, and not allow you to, or let's say you'd be less likely to pass the state test as you went to middle school, as you went to high school, which might, lead to you not graduating. And then they talked about how, then students might end up in the streets and maybe, selling drugs, maybe go to jail, maybe join gangs and this sort of conversation. What happened as a result of that is the assembly happened. And once the assembly was over, the parents who weren't told initially about it, but found out about it later because there were students who were upset about the assembly and they were complaining to their parents. And then the fallout happened. And so the fallout it looks like they've kind of concluded the fallout. So the initial blame was, of course, put on the principal of the school. That situation was a little unique, at least I thought so. The principal of the school was first-time principal. Her name, you can see her name in the shared screen here, Donnell Evanson. And so she caught the brunt of the blame, right? So she's the principal. She, in theory, signed off on this, and she caught the blame. So the fallout from the story is that she's now resigned. Okay, it looks like they were about to fire her, and before they could fire her, she said, "You know what? I'm gonna resign, and then that way I won't have being fired on my resume." Also, we have now seen that one of the teachers who was part of leading that conversation, the keeping it real conversation, he has also resigned from the school. But for me, when I initially talked about this, um, I disagree that they should have had the assembly. I thought singling all of the kids out like that was a bad idea because having a keep it real conversation with students, I'm really not opposed to that, especially black students, because I think a lot of a lot of their parents talk to them like that. And so for a lot of the students, in order to reach them, sometimes you kind of gotta keep it real with them, and that's just the truth. They don't respond to, Bobby, you just gotta do better, Bobby. The world is blah, blah, blah. They don't necessarily respond to that all the time. Sometimes you have to let them know, like, listen, I see where you at, bro. You gotta have these conversations with them. And so I get it. I understand that. I never would have had a conversation with an entire assembly of students like that, that's where they messed up. But I understand the conversation. And so when we look at this, looking at the resignations, right? Before I do that, let me give you more background on the principal. So she was teacher of the year at some point. She was assistant principal of the year prior. So 2022, 23, she was assistant principal of the year. And then this was her first gig as principal. Sad. She had been teaching, they say, about 17 years. This is her first blemish, if you will, in 17 years. And I get it. Some would argue like, this is a big one. But I'm gonna be honest with you. I feel for the principal, especially after seeing the way that it went down. Because I was reading further, and essentially what's coming out now is what happened was that the teachers came up with the idea. And once they brought it to the old principal, the principal who was principal 22, 23, they brought it to him first because apparently, according to the article I read, he still holds an office at the school, even though he's no longer principal at the school. And so they took it to him because he was the principal the previous year, right? He thought it was a great idea. Then, of course, it had to come to her because she's the current principal. And she heard that he had signed off on it. She probably and she's worked at that school, they say, for about 4 or 5 years. So she knew those teachers, right? She was their assistant principal last year. She worked with them the year prior. They were colleagues. So she knew them. So when she heard the idea, I can see her going, oh, okay, that's great. Let's do it. She probably didn't even ask details about what was going to be said. Because when you trust your colleague, you don't ask your colleague a whole lot of details about little things. You be like, man, I know him. His name is Anthony, by the way. I'll call him out. I'll call her out. I'll call him out. His name is Anthony Hines. I know Anthony. Anthony's a great guy. He's a black dude. They're black students. He was there with another black teacher. Like, yeah, that's going to be great for them. Yeah. Not too much. But I get it, being in that situation, why you sign off on it. And unfortunately, like I said, she wasn't even in the assembly. She let those teachers do their thing from all the articles that I've read. So it was approved by the previous principal, who now holds, or at least at the time, he had got moved up to a higher position within the county. Although his main office apparently was still at the elementary school, he now holds a county position. So when they went to him, apparently, I get it. Teachers went to the guy who's accounting. He was a former principal of the school. Now he's got a county position. He was like, great idea. Then it came to her. What is she going to say? Like, well, he liked it, and I know Anthony, and yeah. What, she going to say no? Of course not. You don't say no to your friends when you've known them for years. You be like, yeah, go ahead, man. Again, was it a bad decision? Obviously, it turned out to be a bad decision, but I understand how we get there. And so for me, I'm disappointed that it ends in this young lady losing her job. And then for all intents and purposes, if she tried to get another job in Florida, I'd imagine it's going to be very challenging. So, I don't know what she's going to ultimately decide to do. But at least her career in Florida is probably dead in the water for at least a couple of years until the story blows over. And honestly, I just think that's unfair. Even for the gentleman who had to resign because he kept it too real. I feel bad for him too. One of the challenges, I think, when you're dealing with, and they're a Title I school, the Bunnell Elementary. So you're dealing with probably, kids who come from backgrounds where, this is a broad assumption, and I speak from experience because I've worked in Title I schools before. But usually you're coming from a background where kids, don't necessarily always have the greatest support at home, in the sense that, in a lot of our, especially the younger generation, school is not necessarily always the top priority. And that's just the truth. I'm just being honest. And then doing schoolwork at home in this new generation is foreign anyway, right? I mean, nobody wants to read at home. Nobody wants to do homework. Most teachers don't even try to give homework because they already know these kids ain't gonna do it. So you're in a very challenging environment. So I understand where those teachers are coming from, and I even understand having the conversation. So it's unfortunate that it ends up this way because ultimately the parents who are responsible were upset. And that's how we got here. Because the parents who aren't responsible, they might not even know all this went down. They still may not. All this, the principal resigning, the teacher resigning, some of them still don't know. That's the truth. I guarantee you there's at least one or two parents that still ain't got a clue. But for her to end her career this way, potentially, and she's a young woman. I think she's like maybe 35, 36. To me, it's disappointing because unfortunately, you trusted the wrong people this time. Not that you did anything wrong, but unfortunately, you put your trust in the wrong place under the wrong circumstance, and it bit you in the butt. There's got to be grace in some situation. And I understand that. I mean, the school is just trying to save face. I mean, the district, I should say. The district is trying to save face. So I get where the district's coming from. But, grace has to be extended at some point because intentions matter. Your intent matters when it comes to situations. And especially when in a situation where you had no idea what the curriculum was. And you could argue she should have. Okay, fine, I get that. You weren't in the room, so you couldn't have shut it down if you thought it was going left. And ultimately, you didn't sign off on it first. You signed off on it second after trusting the guy who was there before you that he knew what he was doing. But you're not a fall guy. So yeah, I feel for her. I feel bad that her career may be over, especially in the state of Florida. And that they're going to sweep this under the rug and go, it was that principal and it was that teacher, and we're going to move on. Because what they've already done now that she's resigned, they've taken the old principal and slid him back in that spot. So the guy who initially approved everything is now about to be the principal again. And the person who signed off on it, because he signed off on it, no longer has a job. You tell me, is that right? Under all of the circumstances, is that right? Is that the person who's supposed to not have a job? I'm flabbergasted by it, Again, I think intent matters. Grace matters. When you think about God, but by the grace of God is the only reason why we're here. And so if our Father can give us grace for all the things that we do, how is it that we don't allow grace for the people in our own life? How is it that we don't provide forgiveness for the people in our own life? Because honestly, nobody was hurt physically by the situation. Intent was not wrong. Execution, sure. But in the school system, where we're already dying to find people who want to be there, people who want to give their all to the kids, when you have them and you let them go, because the optics look bad. Grace, man. That's what it's for. That's why God gave it to you. So if God can extend us grace, how is it that we can't do it for people? And we have a big problem with that today. Today we act as if the moment you do something that we don't like, you gotta go. We don't want to have a discussion about it. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to understand the circumstances. You gotta go. You know, I did a video a couple weeks ago where I said some things that some people didn't like. And the first thing they thought to do, you wrong. You sounded almost like you're cooning now, you know? It's just disagreement on some issues, man. That's it. Intent matters, grace matters. We need to get over ourselves. Because we ain't all doing it right. We ain't all doing it right as parents. We're not all doing it right in our own jobs. And every time we do something, we're always looking for grace for ourselves. So why we can't extend it to somebody else? That's what I want to leave y'all with today. Grace matters. Forgiveness matters. Intent matters. Can we stop living on these high horses and stop living in reality? That's the question. Can we? I'm your guy, man. B period, man. Prayers out to both of those individuals. I hope they land on their feet. The young lady, her father started a GoFundMe for her because they have no idea what's about to happen with her and her job situation. So you can see her name right there. You can go find the GoFundMe if you think you want to contribute to it. I think they're trying to raise $250,000, I believe the number is. So there's some resources out there for her if you want to contribute to her situation. But yeah, man, grace, man. I'm your guy, man. B period, man. Love y'all. I'm out.